Yo, what's going on, guys? So in the last video we built this pretty sick editing slash workstation gaming rig, and we got everything at a really great price. Now, a few people in the comments said that this wasn't technically a budget build, but if you take away the 6 terabytes of brand new fast NVMe storage, which you wouldn't necessarily need in a budget build, then that drops the price by about £300, which would mean the whole system cost about £860, and that is what I would consider a pretty great budget build. But the problem was, first time I build it into the case, first time I go to turn it on, and it does this. It just completely crashes, like completely resets, shuts off, and I didn't quite know why. It didn't really make sense. Like, everything was working when it was on the bench, and then I put it in the case and everything's not working, so I'm like, this is kind of strange. Anyway, I mess around with it for like half an hour, unplug stuff, do stuff, nothing's changing. So I assume because of the Intel and 13th, 14th gen issues, and I thought it was the CPU that was bad. Luckily, I was still within the eBay 30-day money-back guarantee, right? So I returned the CPU and also returned the motherboard as well, because I wanted a Z-SKU motherboard so that I could undervolt. So I found this Z790 on eBay, and it was an amazing price, £63. Now, it was sold as seen, right? It was untested, and it had some bent pins. So I was like, okay, fine. So we'll reset the pins. Now, I used some kind of drawing up needle, one of the blue tip ones. I don't know what size that is, but anyway, you can see here just how much we're zoomed in. Anyway, don't use a needle because they bend, and then when you're putting pressure on that pin, it will cause the pin to like suddenly jolt, and that tears the heads off them, as I found out. So I'm actually using a sim removal tool here, and that's what I had the best success with. Now, I'm used to resetting LGA 1150X whatever socket pins. I've done that a lot of times before, but these LGA 1700 socket pins are so much worse. They're very small and they're very fragile as well, which I found out because I broke a few of the heads off. Luckily, when I looked at the pin out, they were grounds, or one of them was a PCIe by 1 lane, which I wasn't using anyway. But yeah, these LGA 1700 pins are really difficult to reset. And this socket was strangely really messed up, right? There was like a lot. It wasn't like someone had dropped the CPU in there or something. It looked very weird. And there was also this SMD that had come off as well. I don't know if someone had tried to put that screw in and they'd knocked it somehow, but again, I don't know how you managed to do that. It's very weird. It's kind of very strange damage to this, like quite a lot of damage to this board. So anyway, I'm gonna try and attempt to solder this SMD back. Now, I don't have the right soldering iron, I don't have the right flux. I'm using plumber's flux for soldering copper pipes together, right? This stuff is huge. I mean, the applicator tip is like 5 times the size of the actual component I'm trying to solder, right? Anyway, it actually works quite well. The soldering iron, again, look how crusty that soldering iron is not meant for micro soldering stuff, right? You know, I use that for soldering wires together and big stuff, right? I don't use it for tiny little things. But anyway, it did kind of work. It made good contact. Luckily, like, the chip was still on, the SMD was still on the board. It was still attached by like one leg, so I didn't have to, like, you know, chase it around the board. But yeah, you can see there, it wasn't quite attached, so I did another run. But yeah, this flux is so bad, but it does work, right? It's great. If I was doing this all day, I wouldn't be using this flux because you can't see anything, right? It's very cloudy. You need a flux that goes clear when you're soldering. But yeah, this one wasn't. You have no visibility. You don't know kind of what you're doing. But anyway, I got good contacts on the legs. I actually put too much solder on that side, so I'm going to wick it up with this solder wick. And yeah, eventually I get all of the legs to bond onto the board. So that was good. That was all making contact. I went through and double checked with a pin to make sure that they weren't you know, I couldn't move any of the legs. They all soldered. And so we're back to the socket again. This is like the 2nd or 3rd bit of damage to this this socket. Again, really strange, because like, how do you do that kind of damage to the socket? Now, when you buy motherboards on eBay and they say they've got socket damage, a lot of the time the motherboard's actually completely balked, and the seller will just mash some pins down so that it looks like all you have to do is reset the pins, but actually there's some other serious problem with the board, right? There's some power delivery problem, one of the chips, IO chip or something has gone. So or it's just a problem that's very difficult to find. Yeah, one of, I don't know, traces is broken or something, right? And I think that might have been the case with this one, because I'm looking at the damage and it just doesn't seem usual. It doesn't seem logical, like, kind of damage. Anyway, I put a CPU in, I test it, and this is exactly what happens. Nothing. The board's completely dead. I'm trying to short the header there, and it's just completely dead. Now, I did actually manage to get some life into the board, and that was through shorting the JBAT1 CMOS header and removing the CMOS battery while plugging in the USB stick with the new BIOS on it, and then pressing the flash BIOS button. And that actually seemed to work. Like, it was flashing, and I thought, oh, great, there's some kind of BIOS issue. But the problem was it just kept doing that forever. And so there were actually quite a few issues with the MSI boards. I know there was quite a few ones with the Tomahawk series. The chipsets were cracked, and there was a few other like BIOS issues as well, very similar to what I was having. Like the motherboard is just completely dead. It has no life in it. So anyway, I returned this to MSI, and they sent over a refurbished board. Now for the CPU, obviously I thought the old one was dead. The 13700 we bought. So I wanted to upgrade, right? So I got this 13900K. I found this really great deal, 13900K for £250, and it still has 3 years Intel warranty left on it. I also went with a Thermalright contact frame because I saw with my cooler and socket bending the chip before with the 3700, I saw like a line through the middle where it's not actually making contact with the paste had spread out so much that it wasn't making great contact. The thing that I really hate about this Z790 Pro gaming board is that the middle SSD, you have to take off like all of this cover. So again, with the P3 Plus, obviously, as we did last time, nothing wrong with the SSDs. I kept the same SSDs. So the P3 Plus for just general stuff, it's a great budget kind of performance. And the KC3000 for all of my fast stuff, right? This is a really great SSD. If you can find that at a good price, I definitely recommend that, because all of the reviewers, everyone's saying it's excellent. And it's got DRAM, so it's like super fast, super reliable. It's got like 1.6 petabytes of terabytes written, so it's gonna last like 50 years or something ridiculous. I went with MX6 again because I had some of that push out problem, right, where it's the paste is kind of getting spread out to the sides. Now for the RAM, I actually decided to go with this RGB stuff from Corsair. It's the cheapest RGB RAM you can get, and there is a reason for that, because the first 2 sticks that I got didn't even go up to 6800 mega transfers. Like, even with iExpo or XMP, it just wouldn't hit 6K. And then the second sticks that I got, they did go up to 6K, but they weren't stable there, and I kept getting blue screens. So I would not recommend this RAM, even though it does look pretty good. But yeah, I kept it, and I just didn't overclock it. So I'm just looking here at the Intel stock power settings, because I don't want to send any more power to this chip than Intel recommends. So for the 13900K, it's 307 amps and 253 watts. So yeah, these are all my BIOS settings. So this is our first Cinebench run, and yeah, the whole thing shuts off, and I couldn't believe it. I was so angry. I was like, okay, maybe I've set the voltage too low, because I'm using the voltage curves. I'm using the most conservative voltage curves, right? So I try it several times, and then I go into the BIOS and I change the voltage curves, and I put everything back to normal, auto and everything, right? And I'm like, okay, maybe I'll try that. Mode 23, like that's the highest voltage curve, and mode 8, that's the highest voltage curve on that, right? And I start everything up, and exactly the same thing happens. I mean, it's crashing even just loading into the desktop. So then I try some trickery on XTU, right? I'm like, okay, let me lower the power down to like 100 watts, okay? Maybe the chip's balked. I'm going to try 100 watts, and I lower the, later I lower the clock speed as well, the base clock as well. So I go in there, it's still crashing. Right, it's still just completely, I was just trying to find something, and then I heard the efficiency cores, they can be causing problems, so I'd go decrease the base clock on the efficiency cores. I'm trying to just see what it will be stable at, right? Just because I've got the chip, and I thought I might as well test it. So I do actually amazingly get it to work, and it's consuming 100 watts, roughly 100 watts, and it's at like 40 degrees. And I don't know what the clocks are, they're 3.5K, right? 3,500 megahertz. So it's not great, obviously. It's getting about 26,000, which funnily enough was actually what we got with the 13700 at 260 watts. So it's actually performing at 100 watts, just around 100 watts. It's performing as well as the 13700. I mean, you can see on the Cinebench score there, it's getting like in between 24 and 30, so it'll be around like 26, 27, which was what the 13700 was getting. So it's actually quite funny, but yeah, this is ridiculous. For that chip, it should be getting like 38, and then it crashes again. So anyway, I was convinced another seller had sent me another faulty CPU, because you hear it everywhere, you know, the 13th and 14th gen issues, you know, you've got the microcode issues, you've got the board partners overpowering the chips, then you've got the degradation, then you've got the problem with the compute fabric and it not being able to withstand the amount of bandwidth and voltage that's going through it because of all of those E-cores. You've also got the chips actually requesting too much voltage from the board. So I thought it was the CPU. Anyway, I'm just going to rip out another power supply from another system I've got, right? And I'm just going to check just to make sure, right? This is a brand new power supply. I know it was working fine 2 days before, right? So I tried the new power supply and immediately everything's working fine, right? And this is a really crappy power supply, right? So I couldn't believe that this CX750, this Corsair CX750 was faulty. You know, it's a brand new power supply and it's faulty. I couldn't believe it. And I actually had problems with the CX in the past as well. I had one of them blow up, it burned out, but that was after some years of use. But anyway, so I would strongly recommend you do not buy any of the Corsair CX series. And a lot of people replied in the comments in the last video and said the CX series is a really problematic power supply. Lots of people have issues with them, and yeah, I can see why. It's really rubbish. So anyway, I went for the MSI A750 GL. It's a modular power supply. I don't care about the modularity, but it's MSI, right? It's a brand, and it was like the cheapest kind of 750 watt that was branded, that wasn't by Corsair. So yeah, it's a nice power supply. The only thing I don't like about it is the cables aren't sheathed, right? So it looks like a really cheap power supply, even though it's not. It does come with the newest style GPU ATX power standard cable thing, so that's cool. Anyway, so also I used some of this dielectric grease on the 24-pin ATX connector because I had real problems with getting that thing unplugged, and I didn't do that with the Corsair series, so that's not the reason that it had problems, right? I didn't use any of the grease for the CX series, but from plugging in and out so many times, it's such an absolute pain to take off. And immediately we have picture, excellent. And so let's see what happens, right? Brand new MSI power supply, and it's working perfectly. Everything's fine. So now everything is fixed. So this was my own fault. I just automatically assumed that it was the used parts that I bought that were defective. It didn't even cross my mind that a brand new power supply, a brand new part, right, from the manufacturer, from the supplier, would be faulty. So we can see the scores here. It's really blurry, but it got about 37,000. Which is exactly what you expect from a 13900K, right? 37 to like 39,000 with a little bit of an overclock, but this is actually an underclock, if anything, right? Because it's 250 watt limited and 300 amp limited. So yeah, really sorry about that poor image quality here, but we can see some of the specs. We can see the temperature, it got up to 72 degrees. We're looking at V-core, we're at 1.35 maximum, so this is a very healthy chip, and I know that because if it wasn't healthy, it would be drawing more voltage, right? Because it would be unstable at the lower voltages, it'd be requesting higher voltage, so 1.35 is a really good, healthy voltage to be at. Now, the second problem that I had was I was using these 180-degree GPU connectors because they look really good, and you know, they're white, they add to the build, right? And they add some contrast. The problem was, I didn't realize loads of people have issues with these, and some people they don't plug them all the way in, and so they overheat and they cause, you know, they can melt the connectors. But I didn't have that issue. The second issue with the connectors is that the pins have a really loose tolerance, and so they actually don't make great contact with the power connector on the GPU. And so what that does is it causes increased resistance, obviously, so it actually increases the amount of heat that's in them. It wastes power as well, but also the problem is it's extremely unstable. I kept getting, as soon as I put the GPU in, the system kept crashing. It kept hanging, kept freezing, and I was like, what's going on? Was something else, another power supply gone? But it was those connectors, so I actually swapped them out. You can and you can see right here, so the system's boot looping, right? And so I was like, geez, like, not again, another power supply's gone. This time maybe it is the CPU, right? I'm like, oh, what the hell? Maybe one of the fan headers is like, I don't know, backwards or something. Maybe it's the fan controller, right, or something. So I unplugged loads of stuff. So I reseat the GPU, trying all of these generic troubleshooting steps, right? And this is where I'm thinking, hey, maybe it is those 180-degree right angle connectors. And yeah, sure enough, it absolutely was. As soon as I put the lead straight into the GPU, it was fine. Now you can see here we're drawing 520 watts, and this is Unigen heaven, right? So we're drawing 520 watts in Unigen with those connectors. I actually got it where it was stable. I actually managed to boot it up once. And then without those connectors, we're at like 20 to 30 watts lower, right? So those, and these connectors, I'm feeling them, they're not as hot, right? I felt the connectors before and they were kind of getting a little bit warm. And so you can see that actually those connectors are wasting like 20 or 30 watts of power, which is insane. So they are absolutely rubbish. Do not buy those connectors, whatever you do. They are complete rubbish. Don't buy them. And some people have had problems where they've melted stuff, right? They've burnt out, so don't do that. So I'm just doing some power testing with a CPU load and a GPU load. This is actually the first time that I've tested the GPU and CPU together, so I want to make sure that we're not over doing too much demand from the power supply. And CPU scored 20.5K and near 19K on the GPU with a very slight overclock, right? So that's really good. Everything's working really well. I put the side panel on just to see what the temperatures are going to do. And yeah, we do some blender benchmarks as well. But I didn't see any temperature difference at all with the side panel on, right? So all those fans are doing their job. Even with the weird intake and over-pressurized intake and only the CPU cooler as the exhaust, which isn't an ideal thing to do, but as I said before, this is in a kitchen, I want that positive air pressure. So this time we're doing the pass mark benchmark. Now, whenever I'm going to build a system, whenever I'm going to build a new system, I always look at pass marks results. Passmark are very accurate for displaying the hardware's capabilities, and you know, it's very logical. The order they put them in, it correlates to the price, it correlates to what the used prices are. Like, it makes a lot of sense. So I'll go on Passmark and I'll set I'll be like, I want this kind of performance, and then I'll see which is the cheapest that can get me closest to that performance. And so we can see on the CPU, we got 59,000, and on the GPU, we got 26,000. I don't care too much about the rating because I'm using a generic SSD that I just had Windows on. And we can see here that that is actually a little bit higher than what the average marks for those are on Passmark. All the other users have submitted. So everything's working great here. I just had to solder in some extra leads to the power switch and the LED on the power switch because the PC is actually in a different room. So I have a power switch that goes through the wall into a different room. So that's why I have to extend these leads out and put both of the power switches and LEDs in parallel with each other. And so this is the final build. And I have to say, I think this looks pretty amazing. This is my first RGB build. Normally I build stuff with, you know, I don't care too much about the way it looks. And the complementary sticker peel as well. I was actually going to leave these on. I'm glad I didn't, because it almost looks like it's in HD once you take them off. Like, it's really, like, the clarity is really great once you take these off. And yeah, I think it looks really great. The RAM looks really good, which is unfortunate because I just wouldn't recommend it. But you're going to pay like over £100 or $120, whatever that is, for RGB RAM. So it is a shame, but I do like the RGB RAM. So I kept it in there. It's stable at 4800. It's just a shame that it doesn't hit its advertised 6K speeds with XMP iExpo. It's just not stable. And you can see here the proper length GPU pillar. So we're no longer trying to jerry rig the stand there. And yeah, I made a little shelf for it to sit on. And this sits in the kitchen, and this is used for our living room. This is used for everything. We have it hooked up to the TV, so this is used for everything. And yeah, it looks really great. And to keep it as flush with the wall as possible, I cut out the back of the cupboards so that all of the wires could pass through, and it'd be as flush as possible in that space. And yeah, there's absolutely no problems with cooling. I'm getting exactly the same temperatures that I was getting with the glass off the case. So yeah, there's no temperature issues here at all. And yeah, I think it just looks pretty cool. And this is with all the lights off. This is at night time, and it's just, yeah, and I just think it looks really quite great. A lot of people in the comments of the last video said that you should have gone with AMD. AMD's cheaper, and you know, it doesn't have the instability problems, and that's absolutely true. If you can find an AM4 or even AM5 chips that are cheaper used, then absolutely go for those. But the problem is that because nobody wants Intel, there's a supply and demand issue, and it drives the price of those Intel chips down even more. So a lot of the Intel stuff can be had at a great bargain. And here is the price breakdown. So we're at about £100 more than the previous. Now I put £100 for the motherboard because even though I did repair it, it didn't fix it, right? So you can get those motherboards for about £140. So I put somewhere in the middle. So we're at about £100 more than the previous build. And this is with a 13900K and a Z-SKU board as well. So it's got everything unlocked. And so this is where the TV is, this is where we use the computer's on the back side of that wall, and that is the switch I was talking about, and that's why I had to solder those wires in. If you guys want to see, I do have a video on how we put that TV in the wall, and it's completely flush with the wall. I do have a video, you guys can check that out. But yeah, everything's working great, and I'm really happy with this build. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to see more computer, car, technology, or DIY stuff, then please subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.